I'd just like to make the point that we're very fortunate that His Majesty has allowed us to use Buckingham Palace for this event.
For more than 4 decades, one velvet box remained absent from every royal inventory, every exhibition, and every official account of Diana's wedding preparations. Then Princess Anne entered a private room at Windsor, placed her late father's handwritten instruction on the table, and revealed the truth. Prince Philip had personally hidden a royal tiara from Diana before she married Charles, and Anne had finally decided the silence had lasted long enough. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne did not reveal it through rumor or palace whispers. She delivered a recorded statement inside Windsor Castle, where generations of family history had been guarded. Her voice remained steady until she spoke Diana's name. Then she paused. The Princess Royal looked less like the monarchy's hardest-working figure, and more like a woman carrying an unbearable promise. The truth was precise. Philip had removed the Windsor Rose tiara from Diana's wedding jewel selection days before the July 1981 ceremony. The diamond and pearl headpiece represented acceptance, not decoration. A royal tiara is a ceremonial jewel, marking rank, duty, and belonging within the family. Diana believed wearing it would mean she had been welcomed. Philip ensured that never happened. He ordered the tiara locked inside an unmarked blue velvet case and transferred from Buckingham Palace to Windsor. No committee rejected it. No repair delayed it. No courtier misplaced it. The Duke acted alone, and Anne confirmed the young bride was never told why it disappeared. Charles received advance notice before the recording became public. He opened the briefing paper, read the first page, and stopped. The king set it down without reaching the final paragraph. He knew Anne's words would drag his first marriage into the light, forcing him to confront what Diana endured and what he had allowed to remain unexplained. Anne placed Philip's handwritten instruction beside the sealed case. One sentence cut through every excuse. The tiara was to be withheld until the marriage proves equal to the burden it creates. After his death, he entrusted the jewel and its secret to his daughter. She was ordered to keep both sealed unless the concealment began harming Diana's legacy more than disclosure would harm the crown. Anne had made her judgment, yet her confession opened a darker question. Why had Philip doubted Diana before the vows were spoken? And what happened inside the palace days before he hid the tiara? To understand why a father-in-law would hide a royal jewel from a 19-year-old bride, the story must return to the people whose private fears turned a wedding tiara into a test of loyalty. The tiara was never merely an ornament. To Diana, it represented acceptance into a family that still watched her with caution. To Philip, it represented duty that could not be awarded on beauty or public affection alone. And to Anne, standing between a guarded father and an overwhelmed future sister-in-law, it became something far more dangerous, a secret she would carry long after both of them were gone. Diana entered the monarchy with the world already judging every movement she made. She was only 19, yet courtiers expected the shy former nursery assistant to understand rules that had shaped the royal household for generations. She was being prepared as a future queen, meaning the woman expected one day to stand beside the sovereign and carry the highest public responsibilities of the crown. But behind the excitement, she remained uncertain, frightened, and desperate for one clear sign that the family truly wanted her. Philip saw the same young woman through a harder lens. He believed historic jewels were not rewards for charm, beauty, or public fascination. To him, they were symbols of service, each carrying duties that could survive affection, marriage, and reputation. The Windsor Rose tiara therefore represented far more than diamonds and pearls. Whoever wore it would be presented as someone trusted to carry the family's history without placing personal pain above royal responsibility. Diana's excitement surfaced during a quiet fitting at Buckingham Palace. She studied the tiara, then turned to Anne and asked softly whether being offered it meant the family had finally accepted her. Anne hesitated. She cared for the nervous young bride, yet Philip had already voiced private doubts about whether Diana understood what marriage to Charles would demand. Anne chose her words carefully. She told Diana that acceptance inside the monarchy was rarely expressed through one object. But the answer failed to hide her discomfort. The Princess Royal wanted to reassure her future sister-in-law, while loyalty pulled her toward the father who had taught her that duty must always come before emotion. Charles had initially supported Diana wearing the piece. He believed its restrained design suited her, and said so during an early discussion. Yet after a tense private exchange with Philip, he withdrew without explanation. Diana noticed the change immediately, although the prince offered her no reason for his silence. Anne later remembered the moment the young bride returned to the fitting table and found the blue velvet case gone. Diana touched the empty space where it had rested the previous day. When a courtier claimed the selection had simply changed, she forced a smile, but her disappointment was impossible to miss. The disappearance had not been caused by tradition, inexperience, or public pressure. One private encounter had changed everything. That encounter took place behind a closed library door, where a single question from Diana transformed Philip's caution into a decision no one dared reverse. 5 days before the wedding, Diana entered Philip's private library expecting reassurance. She left carrying a silence that followed her all the way to St. Paul's Cathedral. What happened during those 20 minutes became the true point of no return, a conversation about Charles, loyalty, and survival that convinced Philip the young bride was already questioning the very marriage the palace was preparing to celebrate. Diana had requested the meeting on July 24, 1981, after days of growing distress over Charles's emotional distance and his continuing attachment to Camilla. Buckingham Palace had become the center of wedding preparations, but for the bride it felt increasingly like a place where everyone knew more than she did. She believed Philip's blunt honesty might give her what others would not, a truthful answer about whether marriage would pull Charles closer or make the distance permanent. Philip remained beside his desk as Diana spoke. She did not accuse anyone. She did not threaten to walk away. She simply asked whether love could grow after a wedding if it was not secure before the vows. The question unsettled him because it exposed what the family had tried to contain. Diana was not entering the marriage blindly. She could already sense the fault line beneath it. Philip answered with duty. He told her that royal marriage demanded endurance, restraint, and loyalty to something larger than personal happiness. Duty, in this world, meant placing the crown and its public responsibilities above private pain. He believed the ceremony could steady the relationship if both sides accepted the burden without hesitation. Diana refused to pretend. She told him she could not wear the family's symbols while acting as though she did not see what was happening around her. Philip heard fear in her words, but he also heard resistance. To him, that resistance suggested her suffering might one day become public defiance. Diana left without receiving the reassurance she had sought. Philip waited until the door had closed, then summoned Anne. When his daughter arrived, he opened the wedding jewel catalog and ordered the Windsor rose tiara removed from the bridal selection immediately. He said the piece could not become linked to a union whose private foundations already appeared unstable. Anne challenged him once. She warned that Diana would experience the removal as punishment for speaking honestly. Philip closed the catalog with a firm hand and replied that the crown could not reward doubt before the vows were even spoken. Anne obeyed, but she never accepted the judgment. The tiara vanished before the wedding, yet the argument survived inside her. Years later, that buried disagreement would return with far greater force. The tiara vanished before the wedding, but the argument did not. It waited in silence, until Anne finally forced Philip to face what his decision had done to Diana. The confrontation came years after the wedding, when the marriage had begun to fracture, and Diana's isolation was no longer possible to dismiss. Anne entered Philip's study, carrying the same blue velvet box he had ordered hidden. She placed it directly in front of him and demanded an answer not as a royal representative, but as a daughter asking whether her father had mistaken a frightened young woman's honesty for disloyalty. Anne had watched Diana's unhappiness deepen behind the ceremony and applause. The young princess had entered the family searching for security, yet the marriage had left her increasingly alone. That suffering forced Philip's daughter to reconsider the decision she had once obeyed, because the missing tiara no longer seemed like a cautious act. It felt like the first warning that Diana would always be judged before she was heard. Anne retrieved the sealed case from Windsor's secure storage and carried it herself. Secure storage meant the protected rooms where historic jewels and sensitive royal possessions were kept under restricted access. She refused to involve courtiers, officials, or advisors. This confrontation belonged only to a father and daughter who had carried the same secret for too long. Philip watched her place the box between them. Anne told him Diana had understood its disappearance as proof that the family already distrusted her. The bride had asked one honest question, she argued. and the response had been to remove the clearest symbol of acceptance she had been offered. Philip rejected the accusation. He insisted the jewel had been withheld to prevent premature symbolism, meaning the monarchy could not publicly present Diana as fully trusted before the marriage had proved stable. The Duke believed he had protected the institution from linking a historic tiara to a union already showing signs of strain. Anne did not soften. She accused him of testing Diana at the moment she most needed reassurance. Philip struck the desk lightly with his palm, but his daughter did not step back. She had obeyed him once. She would not surrender the truth again. Philip finally admitted the fear beneath his decision. He had believed Diana might use royal symbols to create an identity independent of Charles, becoming more powerful in the public imagination than the husband she was expected to support. His order had not been driven by protocol alone. It had been shaped by anxiety over what she might become. Anne opened the box. Philip stared at the untouched tiara, then admitted Diana's instincts about the marriage had been more accurate than the family's promises. Regret entered his voice, but he still refused to release the jewel. Instead, Philip placed its fate in Anne's hands. Philip's regret changed the meaning of the secret, but his final instruction transformed it into a battle over who had the right to decide when the monarchy must confess. Philip did not return the tiara to the collection. Instead, he transferred responsibility for it to the one person he believed would neither exploit Diana's memory nor protect the palace at any cost. With a signature, a key, and one severe instruction, he made Anne the guardian of a secret that even the sovereign could not quietly erase, and years later, that choice placed brother against sister. Philip created a private custodial instruction, granting his daughter control over the Windsor rose tiara, and every letter connected to its removal. A custodial instruction is a formal direction naming who must protect an important object and decide how it may be handled. His order made Anne responsible after his death, but it also forced her to carry the moral weight of a decision she had opposed from the beginning. The arrangement allowed no easy escape. Anne could not permit the jewel to be worn, displayed, altered, or reassigned until she personally decided whether revealing its history would serve Diana's memory and protect the crown's integrity. That judgment mattered, because silence could preserve the palace's reputation, while disclosure could expose how fear had shaped the treatment of a vulnerable bride. Anne felt the burden fully after Philip's funeral. She sat alone with the sealed instruction and traced her father's signature with one finger. Grief pulled her toward loyalty, but memory pulled harder. He had trusted her because she would not condemn him carelessly, yet he also knew she would never excuse him simply because he was gone. Charles soon requested a private meeting at Windsor. The king asked his sister to return the tiara quietly to the general royal collection, meaning the shared group of historic jewels available for official family use. He argued that reopening the secret would wound William, Harry, and the monarchy itself. The past was already painful, he said. Giving it a new voice could make that pain impossible to contain. Anne refused. She told Charles that quietly restoring the tiara would complete the original injustice. Diana's name would disappear, Philip's order would remain hidden, and the jewel would pass to another woman, as though the frightened bride had never stood beside its empty place. Charles pressed her once more. Anne remained unmoved. Her father's final letter contained a concession the king could not dismiss. If Diana's sons ever believed the monarchy had deliberately diminished their mother, his daughter had authority to reveal everything. That condition became impossible to ignore when William found a reference to the sealed case among Philip's papers. He demanded to see the tiara his mother had never been allowed to open. Once Diana's eldest son entered the secret, the tiara could no longer remain a private argument between Anne, Philip's memory, and the king. William did not react with anger at first. He simply stared at the tiara resting inside the faded blue case, its pearls untouched, its diamonds preserved exactly as they had been before his parents' wedding. Then he read Philip's instruction. The future king closed the document, stepped away from the table, and asked the question Anne had feared most. Did his mother ever know the truth? William had discovered the first clue inside a private inventory prepared during the reorganization of Philip's papers. The inventory was a detailed list used to record valuable objects, letters, and instructions left within a royal collection. One entry referred to the Windsor rose case, yet it contained no explanation of why the jewel had remained sealed for decades. Anne agreed to meet her nephew at Windsor, without secretaries, lawyers, or palace advisors. She placed the tiara on a plain table beside Philip's original order, and the later custodial letter that had given her control over its fate. Nothing stood between William and the truth now. No prepared statement could soften it. William asked again whether Diana had known. Anne answered carefully, but she did not hide behind formal language. His mother had never been told that Philip personally removed the tiara because of the questions she raised during their library conversation. She had entered the wedding believing the selection had simply changed. William's composure cracked. He turned away, struggling to reconcile the grandfather he had loved with the man who had deepened Diana's sense of rejection. Philip had later offered her support during the collapse of the marriage, yet he had also helped create the feeling that she was distrusted before the vows were spoken. That contradiction cut deeper than simple anger. William returned to the table and noticed a small presentation card beneath the case. Diana's name had been written across it, then crossed out in Philip's unmistakable hand. The prince touched the edge of the card but did not lift it. One line of ink had reduced his mother's promised welcome to a decision she never understood. Anne then revealed the final blow. Charles had known the tiara was being withdrawn, but he had not challenged his father. William absorbed the admission in silence. His grief now carried a second wound, the realization that his father had seen the rejection forming and allowed it to happen. William did not demand publication. Instead, he asked Anne to give him one private meeting with Charles. The fate of the tiara now depended not on palace law, but on what a son would say to his father when no secretary, courtier, or crown could speak for either of them. There were no aides in the room, no briefing folders, and no prepared phrases. William sat opposite Charles with Philip's crossed-out presentation card between them. For once, the conversation was not about succession, duty, or public response. It was about Diana. More precisely, it was about the moment Charles knew a symbol of welcome had been taken from his bride and chose not to ask for it back. William had requested the meeting at Clarence House without Anne, Camilla, advisors, or recording staff. Clarence House was the King's London residence, a private royal home used for work and family meetings away from Buckingham Palace. The prince wanted no institutional shield around either of them. Whatever was said had to come from a son seeking truth and a father who could no longer hide behind protocol. William placed a copy of Philip's handwritten order on the table. He asked Charles exactly when he learned the Windsor rose tiara had been withdrawn and why he remained silent. The king did not challenge the document. He admitted his father had informed him before the wedding, when doubts surrounding the marriage were already spreading behind closed doors. Charles explained that confronting Philip would have exposed how unstable everything had become. The ceremony was days away. The public expectation was enormous, and any family dispute risked becoming a crisis. He had convinced himself that preserving calm would protect Diana as well as the monarchy. William rejected that defense quietly. Silence had protected the wedding, he said, but it had not protected his mother. The distinction landed with brutal force. Charles lowered his eyes and did not argue. For the first time, the king accepted that avoiding conflict had left Diana alone at the moment she most needed someone beside her. Charles then revealed another secret. Years into the marriage, he had considered giving Diana the tiara as a private gesture of repair. He abandoned the plan because returning it would have forced him to explain why Philip had removed it. His fear of reopening the wound ensured it never healed. William listened without interrupting. He was not asking his father to erase the past. He was asking him to stop defending the silence surrounding it. Charles finally agreed. He authorized Anne to disclose the full truth through her recorded statement, and ordered that the tiara could never be reassigned, as though Diana had no connection to it. The jewel would remain tied to her name, her exclusion, and the family's admission of failure. Anne began preparing the disclosure immediately. Yet no one understood what one photograph of the opened case would unleash. The private reckoning ended with a father's admission, but the public reckoning began the moment Anne allowed the world to see Diana's crossed-out name. By sunrise, the story was no longer confined to Windsor. One photograph dominated television screens and newspaper stands, the Windsor rose tiara, inside its blue velvet case, beside a card bearing Diana's name with a single dark line drawn through it. The image required no palace interpretation. To millions watching, it captured an entire tragedy: the welcome she expected, the doubt she encountered, and the truth hidden until Anne finally opened the box. Anne released the truth through a carefully worded recorded statement, approved after the private agreement between Charles and William. She confirmed Philip's original decision, described her later confrontation with him, and explained why the family had finally chosen disclosure over silence. Her words carried unusual force because she did not attack her father or excuse him. She allowed both his fear and Diana's suffering to remain in the same account. The palace followed with a formal announcement. The Windsor Rose Tiara would enter a permanent memorial collection dedicated to Diana rather than return to the pool of jewels available for royal use. A memorial collection is a protected group of objects preserved to honor a person's life and historical importance. The decision ensured that no future princess could wear the piece, while its connection to the woman denied it remained hidden. Anne watched the first broadcast from Windsor without speaking. The presenter described her statement as an act of loyalty to Philip and to the woman his judgment had wounded. Those words shook her. She had spent decades believing loyalty meant carrying her father's burden. Now the Princess Royal understood that loyalty could also mean exposing its consequences. William refused a long public response. The prince issued one sentence through his office, saying his mother deserved to have the full truth connected to her name. Its restraint made the emotion stronger. He did not condemn his grandfather, yet he would no longer allow Diana's exclusion to be softened into an administrative change. One front page captured the national mood. Beneath the headline, "The Tiara Diana Never Saw," the crossed-out card appeared above a photograph of the young bride arriving at St. Paul's Cathedral. Celebration and suffering now stood together, separated only by the secret the palace had kept. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace. One woman stepped toward Diana's memorial gate, placed a single white rose beneath it, and left a handwritten note. "At last, it belongs to your story." That gesture made Anne's final responsibility unavoidable. She had revealed why the tiara disappeared. Now she had to decide whether it would remain forever unworn, or appear once more in a form that restored Diana's place without allowing anyone to replace her. The world had heard the confession, but closure would come only when Anne decided what the hidden tiara would represent from that day forward. Anne's final decision was neither revenge against Philip, nor an attempt to rewrite Diana's wedding. She refused to place the tiara on another royal head. She refused to bury it again. Instead, she ordered the blue case opened permanently beneath Diana's name, transforming an object once used to measure her worthiness into a lasting admission that the young bride had been judged before she had been given a fair chance. Anne formally assigned the Windsor Rose Tiara to a permanent memorial display dedicated to Diana. A memorial display is a protected exhibition preserving objects and documents connected to a person's life and legacy. Beside the jewel would sit the uncensored records explaining why it had been removed before the wedding, ensuring that no future palace account could separate the tiara from the woman who had been denied it. The display carried every painful layer of the truth. It recorded Philip's original fear, his later regret, Anne's opposition, Charles's silence, and William's insistence that honesty did not require destroying the family. Each name remained because removing even one would turn confession back into concealment. Anne stood alone beside the case before it was prepared for exhibition. She spoke quietly to Philip's memory, telling her father that protecting the crown could never again mean hiding the pain of those who served it. The Princess Royal did not condemn him. She simply completed the correction he had been unable to make himself. William visited the finished display privately. The prince rested his hand against the edge of the case and placed a photograph of Diana smiling beneath the presentation card that once excluded her. His gesture carried no anger. It returned warmth to a story shaped for too long by rejection. Anne then disclosed the final meaning of Philip's last letter through her documented account. He had not asked history to excuse him. He had instructed the family to correct his decision if silence ever became a second act of cruelty. Charles authorized the complete record to remain accessible. The king accepted that his failure to intervene belonged beside his father's order and could not be softened by palace language. The tiara never reached Diana before her wedding, but it finally returned to her name, her experience, and her legacy. Anne ended her silence not to destroy Philip, but to finish the accountability he had left behind. The monarchy was diminished by the concealment, yet strengthened by the confession. Loyalty did not mean defending every old decision. Sometimes it meant opening the box, naming the wound, and refusing to hide it again. The Windsor Rose Tiara would never crown another princess, because its final purpose was greater than ceremony. It became the truth Diana had been denied, preserved at last where no one could remove it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.